The cold shocked her system, chasing away some of the fog of exhaustion. How much further? She asked. 3 more hours at full speed. We'll reach Shadow Peak by dawn. Dawn. Then this strange new life would truly begin. Sarah settled against a tree trunk, pulling her cloak tight against the chill. Darian stood watch nearby, alert and tense. Even resting, he looked ready for battle. Can I ask you something? Sarah ventured after a moment of silence. You can ask. I may not answer. Fair enough. Earlier, you said you needed a mate before the Autumn Council. Why? Darian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, pack law, an alpha must be mated to hold their position beyond age 30. I turned 30 in 2 months. Understanding dawned. So if you didn't find a mate, the council could challenge my right to lead. Force me to step down or fight every male who thinks they could do better. His jaw clenched. I've held Shadow Peak for 8 years. Rebuilt it from the ruins my father left. I'm not surrendering it to some ambitious fool because of an outdated law. So you needed any mate. And I was. Convenient. You were willing. He turned to look at her directly. Don't underestimate the value of that. I don't have time for courtship or political games. You needed chosen. I needed a mate. We helped each other. It was brutally practical. Unromantic. But at least it was honest. What should I expect when we arrive? Sarah asked. Your pack, will they accept me? Darian's laugh was harsh. No. They'll hate you on principle because you're weak and from a foreign pack. They'll test you. Push you. Try to force you into submission or drive you away. Sarah's stomach dropped. That's not encouraging. I'm not here to coddle you with pretty lies. He crossed his arms. Shadow Peak isn't like Moonridge. We don't have ceremonies and traditions. We have survival. The strong protect the weak, but they don't tolerate uselessness. I'm not useless. Sarah said, anger sparking. Then prove it. His amber eyes pinned her. That's what you'll have to do every single day. Prove you deserve to be there. Prove you're more than the runt everyone sees. And what about you? The question burst out before she could stop it. Will you protect me or just throw me to the wolves? I'll protect you from real danger, but I won't shield you from every challenge. Darian's expression was hard. If I do, they'll never respect you. Never see you as anything but my burden. You want to survive Shadow Peak? You'll have to fight for your place. It was the opposite of everything Sarah had hoped for. No gentle introduction. No gradual acceptance. Just trial by fire. I don't know if I can do this. She admitted quietly. You can. You already chose to. That takes courage most wolves don't have. Darian pushed off the tree he'd been leaning against. Rest now. We leave in 30 minutes. He walked to the other side of the clearing, giving her space. Leaving her alone with her racing thoughts and the growing weight of what she'd agreed to. Sarah touched the ring on her finger, too large, too heavy, too real. She'd wanted to be chosen to matter to someone. Careful what you wish for. Her grandmother's voice whispered in memory because now she belonged to the most dangerous alpha in 3 territories. Was heading to a pack that would hate her. And had no idea if she was strong enough to survive what came next. But as Sarah looked up at the unfamiliar stars, through the canopy of strange trees, one thought burned bright. She'd been unwanted for so long that even danger and uncertainty, and a mate who'd chosen her for politics felt like a chance at something more, and she'd be damned if she wasted a chapter 4 shadow. Peak dawn broke gray and cold over Shadow Peak territory. Sarah saw the pack lands long before they reach them, a valley, carved between two mountains. Peaks shrouded in perpetual mist where Moon Ridge had been open. Meadows and gentle hills. Shadow Peak was all sharp edges and shadows, dark pine forests. Climbed. The mountainside's stone outcroppings jutted from the earth like broken teeth even. The air tasted different here, wilder, heavier, with ancient power. Darien shifted back to human form at the valley's edge, dressing quickly while Sarah climbed down. On trembling legs, 3 hours of riding had left her sore and exhausted. But she forced herself to stand straight. First impressions mattered. Even when you were too tired to think. Stay close, Darien said, shouldering her pack. Again. Don't make eye contact with anyone unless I tell you to. Don't speak unless spoken to directly. And whatever happens, don't show fear. That's a lot of don't. Sarah muttered. His mouth twitched. Almost a smile, almost welcome. To Shadow Peak they walked down into the valley as the sun crept higher, burning away some of the mist. The pack settlement came into view. Gradually. From not the neat cottages and communal buildings of Moonridge, but a sprawling collection of structures that looked like they'd grown organically from the land itself. Stone houses built into hillsides, wooden longhouses with smoke curling from their chimneys. Training yards were even now in the early morning light. Wolves sparred with brutal efficiency. And everywhere wolves, dozens of them, all turning to stare as Darien and Sarah entered the settlement. The whisper started immediately. Is that her? She's tiny. He actually went through with it. Look at her. She can barely stand. Sarah kept her eyes forward and her chin up, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. These wolves were different from Moonridge pack. Harder. Scarred. Every single one looked like they could kill her without breaking a sweat. Darien's hand found the small of her back again, that now familiar gesture of possession and protection. The mate bond pulsed between them, offering a thread of comfort in the sea of hostile stares. They walked through the settlement to a large stone building at its heart. The pack house, Sarah realized. Where the Alpha lived. Where she would live now. A woman waited on the steps, tall, powerful, with silvery blonde hair pulled back in a severe braid. She wore leather training gear, and had the build of a warrior. Her ice blue eyes swept over Sarah with open disdain. So this is the famous mate. The woman said, her voice dripping with contempt. Darien, you could have at least chosen someone who looks like she could survive a week here. Kara. Darien's voice held a warning. Where's the council? Waiting in the great hall. They're not happy. Kara's eyes never left Sarah. Neither is anyone else. You left for a mate and came back with this. Sarah felt her face flush. Anger battling with humiliation. But she remembered Darien's voice. Darien's warning, don't show fear. She met Kara's gaze directly. I have a name. Sarah said quietly. It's Sarah. And I'm stronger than I look. Kara laughed sharp and cruel. Well, see about that. She turned to Darien. The council wants to see her. Now. They're invoking the right of assessment. Something dark crossed Darien's face. Of course they are. What's the right of assessment? Sarah asked. Though she had a sinking feeling, she didn't want to know. Pack law. Kara answered before Darien could. When an alpha brings a new mate into the pack, the council can assess whether she's worthy. Test her strength. Her knowledge. Her value to the pack. Her smile was predatory. Most fail. Most don't have an alpha willing to fight for them, Darien said coldly. Take us to the council. Let's get this over with. He guided Sarah into the pack house. Through corridors lit by torches. And lined with weapons on the walls. Everything here spoke of warfare, of survival, of strength as the only currency that mattered. The Great Hall was exactly what Sarah expected. Massive, austere, dominated by a long table where 5 wolves sat in judgment. 3 men, 2 women, all older and radiating authority. The council that governed Shadow Peak alongside their alpha. They stood as Darien entered, showing respect for his position. But their eyes on Sarah held nothing but skepticism. Alpha Darien. The eldest man spoke gray-haired and scarred across half his face. Welcome home. We heard rumors you'd found a maid at Moonridge. Not rumors, fact. Darien pulled Sarah forward gently. This is Sarah Thornbrook, my chosen mate. She's under my protection and entitled to all the rights of an alpha's mate if she's worthy. One of the women said she was middle-aged with sharp features and calculating eyes. The council invokes the right of assessment. We must know what she brings to Shadow Peak. She brings herself. That's enough. No, the scarred man said firmly. It's not, you know, our ways, Darien. You've led this pack back from the brink, but you did it by enforcing our laws. You can't ignore them now because they're inconvenient. Darien's jaw clenched. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sarah stepped forward before she could second-guess herself. What does the assessment involve? 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her with surprise. Apparently they hadn't expected her to speak. The scarred man leaned back in his chair, studying her. 3 trials over 3 days. Combat knowledge, endurance, pass all 3. And you're accepted as one of us. Fail even one. He shrugged. You leave Shadow Peak. The mate bond dissolves. That's not how mate bonds work. Sarah protested. Once formed, they can be severed if both parties agree, or if the council rules the council. They can be severed if both parties agree, or if the council rules the council. The council rules the council. They can be severed if both parties agree, or if the council rules they can be severed if both parties agree, or if both parties agree, or if the council rules the bond invalid. Bond invalid. The calculating woman smiled without. The calculating woman smiled without warmth. We've done it before. We can do it again. We've done it before. We can do it again. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Shed thought the bond was permanent, sacred, but Shed thought the bond was permanent, sacred, but apparently in Shadow Peak even that could be taken. But apparently in Shadow Peak even that could be taken away. This is ridiculous, Darien said, his voice away. This is ridiculous, Darien said, his voice hard as stone. She just arrived. She needs time to rest. Hard as stone. She just arrived. She needs time to rest, to adjust. She needs to prove herself. The guard man interrupted. Just like every other wolf in this pack has had to. You taught us that. Alpha. No exceptions. No special treatment. Strength earns respect. Darien looked like he wanted to argue further, but Sarah could see the trap. If he fought too hard for her, he'd undermine his own authority. Prove that he gave special treatment to his mate while demanding that everyone else earn their place. I'll do it, Sarah said quietly. Sarah. I'll do the assessment. She looked up at Darien, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. You said I'd have to prove myself every day. Might as well start now. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe even admiration. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned back to the council. When do we start? The scarred man smiled a genuine smile, this time, though no less dangerous. I like her spirit, Darien. Let's see if she has anything else. He stood, the other council members following suit. The first trial begins at noon. Combat. You'll face one of our wolves in the training yard. Not to death, he added, seeing Darian's expression darken, but to submission or unconsciousness. Standard dominance fight. Sarah's stomach dropped. Combat. Against wolves who'd been training their entire lives to be warriors. Against opponents who probably outweighed her by 50 pounds. She was going to lose. They all knew it. But if she didn't at least try. If she backed down now, she'd be admitting defeat before she even began. I understand, she managed. Good. The calculating woman's eyes gleamed. I suggest you spend the next few hours preparing. You're going to need it. The council filed out, leaving Sarah and Darian alone in the Great Hall. The moment they were gone, Darian rounded on her. You didn't have to agree to this. What choice did I have? Say no and prove I'm too weak to be here. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. At least this way, I have a chance. You have no chance. Darian's words were brutal in their honesty. Not in combat, you know that. Then why did you bring me here? The question exploded out of her. Weeks of frustration and fear finally breaking through. You knew what your pack was like. You knew they'd test me. Why choose me at all if you knew I'd fail? Darian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. Because I thought I could protect you. Shield you from the worst of it until you found your footing. He shook his head. I underestimated how much the council resents me choosing an outsider. They want me to fail. Yes. At least he was honest. Sarah sank onto a bench, exhaustion and despair washing over her. I should have stayed in Moonridge. Should have just accepted being alone. You could still go back. Darian sat beside her, not touching. But close enough that she could feel his presence. I could escort you to the border. Tell the council the bond didn't take you be free. Freedom back to her grandmother's cottage. Back to sitting alone at ceremonies, back to being invisible and unwanted and slowly withering away. Or forward into danger. And trials shed likely fail, but at least trying, at least fighting no. Sarah said finally, I'm staying. I'm doing this. Why? She looked up at him, this brutal, scarred alpha who'd chosen her for all the wrong reasons. But hadn't lied to her once. Because for the first time in my life someone chose me, even if it was just for politics, even if you need me more than want me. She touched the too large ring on her finger. That means something. And I'm not throwing it away without a fight. Darian's expression shifted, something almost like respect, warming those cold amber eyes. Then we have 4 hours to prepare you. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, if you're going to lose anyway, let's make sure you lose with honor. It wasn't encouraging, but somehow it was exactly what Sarah needed to hear. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. 4 hours to prepare for a fight she couldn't win. 4 hours to prove she was more than the runt everyone saw. 4 hours before her new life, true and true, truly began or ended. Sarah just hoped she'd survive long enough to find out which chapter 5 the first trial. The training yard was packed. Word had spread fast. The new alphas, mate the weak runt from Moonridge, was going to fight every wolf in Shadow Peak who could walk, had gathered to watch what promised to be a spectacular humiliation. Sarah stood at the edge of the yard trying to control her breathing. 4 hours of preparation with Darian had taught her exactly one thing. She was hopelessly outmatched, had shown her basic defensive stances, how to protect her throat and belly, how to fall without breaking bones, all necessary skills when you knew you were going to lose. He hadn't tried to teach her offense. There was no point, remember, Darian said quietly beside Survive as long as you can show courage that matters more than winning. Easy for him to say. Had probably never lost a fight in his life. The scarred councilman's member Sarah had learned his name was Garrett. Stepped into the center of the yard. His voice boomed across the gathered crowd. By pack law and the right of assessment, Sarah Thornbrook will face trial by combat. The fight continues until submission, unconsciousness, or he paused. Death. Though we prefer the first two options. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Her opponent today is Kara Steelclaw, our pack's head warrior. Of course it was Kara. The silver-haired woman who'd looked at Sarah like something shed scrape off her boot. Kara stepped into the yard already stripped down to fighting leathers, her muscles coiled and ready. She looked like a war goddess. Beautiful, deadly, absolutely merciless. Sarah suddenly wanted to vomit, shift, and fight, or fight as human. Garrett continued. Your choice. Sarah Thornbrook. Shifting meant revealing just how pathetically small her wolf was. Fighting as human meant facing a trained warrior with nothing but the basic moves Darian had frantically taught her that morning. She chose human. At least that way the humiliation would be slightly less visible. Sarah walked into the center of the yard on shaking legs. The crowd pressed closer there. Excitement palpable. Blood sport had always drawn crowds, and she was today's entertainment. Kara circled her slowly. Predatory. Last chance to run back to Moonridge. Little Runt. And not running. Sarah's voice came out, steadier than she felt. Pity. Kara smiled. I was hoping you'd make this interesting. Garrett raised his hand. Fight begins on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Kara moved like lightning. Sarah barely had time to raise her arms before the first hit connected. A brutal punch to her ribs that drove the air from her lungs. She staggered back, gasping, and Kara was already there with a kick that swept her legs out from under her. Sarah had a hard time holding back her breath. She held her hands together and she held her hands together and she held her hands together. Sarah hit the ground hard, dust filling her mouth. The crowd roared, get up, get up, get up. She rolled to the side just as Kara's boot slammed down where her head had been. Scrambled to her feet, arms up in the defensive stance Darian had shown her. Block the throat, protect the belly. Kara came at her again, a flurry of strikes that Sarah could barely track, let alone block. Fists and elbows and knees, each one landing with brutal precision. Sarah's arms took most of the damage, but enough got through that she tasted blood. Is this all you've got? Kara taunted. Pathetic. The crowd was chanting now Kara's name over and over. Sarah caught a glimpse of Darian at the edge of the yard, his face carved from stone. He wasn't going to intervene, couldn't, without undermining everything. She was alone in this. Kara grabbed Sarah's arm and twisted, sending her crashing to the ground again. This time, Kara followed her down, knee pressing into Sarah's spine, hand fisting in her hair to wrench her head back, exposing her throat. Submit, Kara growled. Make this easier on yourself. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to give in, to end this torture. She was going to lose anyway, why prolong the agony? But then she saw them. The faces in the crowd, the satisfaction, the smugness. The absolute certainty that she was weak, worthless, exactly what they'd expected. And something in Sarah cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice under pressure. Revealing something harder beneath. She remembered every ceremony where Shed sat alone. Every dismissive glance. Every whispered insult. Every moment of being invisible, unwanted. Less than. No. Sarah gasped out. What? I said no. With strength she didn't know she possessed. Sarah twisted in Kara's grip, not breaking free, but shifting just enough to get her elbow into Kara's ribs. It wasn't much. Barely made Kara grunt. But it was enough to loosen her hold for a fraction of a second. Sarah rolled, kicking out wildly. Her foot connected with something Kara's shin, and then she was scrambling away, putting distance between them. The crowd had gone quiet. Sarah stood, swaying, blood dripping from her split lip. Every part of her body screamed in pain. But she raised her fists again. "I'm not submitting," she said clearly. Kara's expression shifted surprise, giving way to something that might have been her own. She said, "I'm not submitting," she said clearly. Or might have been anger at being denied an easy victory. "Your funeral," Kara said. She attacked again, but this time Sarah was ready. Not skilled enough to win, but determined enough to make it cost something. She blocked what she could, rolled with the hits she couldn't avoid, and refused to stay down. Again and again, Kara put her on the ground. Again and again, Sarah got back up. The crowd's bloodlust shifted to something else, a kind of horrified fascination. This wasn't supposed to happen. The runt was supposed to break quickly, submit like any sensible wolf outmatched by a superior opponent. But Sarah kept getting up. "Stay down," Kara snarled, frustration leaking through her controlled demeanor. "Make me." Sarah spat blood into the dust. They clashed again. This time, when Kara reached for her, Sarah remembered something Thomas had taught her years ago when dealing with aggressive patients used their momentum against them. She didn't try to block Kara's way. She didn't try to take Kara's charge. Instead, she dropped and rolled, letting Kara's own force carry her past. Kara stumbled, caught off guard. It gave Sarah 3 precious seconds. 3 seconds to breathe, to think, to go. Kara's fist caught her in the temple, and the world exploded into stars. Sarah felt herself falling, the ground rushing up. This time, she didn't have the strength to rise. Her vision blurred, doubled. She could hear the crowds roar like it was coming from the sky. She could hear the crowds roar like it was coming from the sky. She could hear the crowds roar like it was coming from underwater. Kara's boot pressed against her throat, not choking, but dominant. The classic submission pose. "Submit," Kara demanded. "Now." Sarah's mouth moved, trying to form the words. She should submit. It was over. Shed lost. Continuing would just mean more pain. But through her blurred vision, she saw Darian. Saw something in his expression, not disappointment. Not pity. Pride. Shed lost the fight. But she hadn't lost herself. Sarah gasped against the pressure on her throat. "I submit." The words tasted like ash, but they were necessary. Fighting to unconsciousness would prove nothing except stubbornness. Kara immediately removed her boot and stepped back. The crowd erupted, some disappointed at the lack of bloodshed. Others impressed despite themselves. Garrett's voice cut through the noise. Trial by combat failed, but he paused, and Sarah saw him exchange a glance with the other council members. Sarah Thornbrook showed courage in the face of certain defeat. She has earned the right to attempt the second trial. Sarah lay in the dust, too exhausted to feel relief. Shed failed, just like everyone expected. The fact that Shed made it slightly less pathetic than anticipated didn't change the outcome. Hands gripped her arms, Darian, lifting her carefully. She wanted to tell him she could walk, but her legs weren't cooperating. He carried her from the training yard without a word. He carried her from the training yard without a word. The crowd parting around them. Behind them, she heard voices. Did you see how many times she got back up? Kara actually had to work for it. Still lost, though. Yeah, but did you see? Darian carried her into the pack house. Upstairs that made her head spin. Into a room she barely registered. He laid her on a bed soft. Impossibly soft after the hard-packed earth of the training yard. Stay still, he ordered. I'll get the healer. Wait. Sarah caught his arm with trembling fingers. Did I? Was it completely pathetic? Darian looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw his expression soften. No. It was brave. Foolish, but brave. I lost. I lost. You lost with honor. In Shadow Peak, that matters. He gently removed her hand from his arm. Rest now. You have 2 more trials ahead. 2 more chances to fail. 2 more public humiliations. But as Sarah's eyes drifted closed, she realized something. She'd gotten back up. Again and again. She'd risen when everything in her screamed to stay down. Maybe that was worth something after all. The healer was an elderly woman named Mira, with gentle hands and sharp eyes. She tutored over Sarah's injuries, cracked ribs, extensive bruising. That split lip, possible concussion while applying salves that smelled of pine and something bitter. You're lucky Kara pulled her punches, Mira said, wrapping Sarah's ribs with practiced efficiency. She could have broken you in half. She pulled her punches? Sarah couldn't imagine what the fight would have been like at full strength. Toward the end, yes. After you kept getting up, she stopped trying to destroy you, and started trying to make you submit. Mira's eyes crinkled. Take it as the compliment it was meant to. Darian stood by the window, silent. Had been there the entire time Mira worked, watching with that unreadable expression. The second trial is tomorrow? Sarah asked, wincing as Mira pressed something cold against her bruised face. Day after tomorrow, Darian corrected. You need time to recover. The council agreed to give you 2 days between trials. Small mercies. What's the second trial? Sarah asked. Knowledge, Garrett said. Yes. They'll test your understanding of pack law, healing, history, survival skills. Darian turned from the window. It's oral examination before the full pack. You'll answer questions until they're satisfied, or until you fail to answer correctly 3 times. So the opposite of the physical trial, this one would test her mind. Her one actual strength.